so much gloom hiding the reality. It's just a beautiful day. Yeah, it's a beautiful day. It's just yeah, it's a beautiful day. Yeah, it's a beautiful day. It's just yeah. Take a look into the sky. Take a look into the sky. Keep your head up high. Take a look into the sky.
Off and running, sights and sounds of a day here, a meet at Gulfstream Park. And it's good to have you with us, everybody, on this live Thursday edition of Gulfstream Park today. Jason Blue and Acacia Courtney alongside, and just another perfect weather in the neighborhood for thoroughbred racing as we settle in as Classico week continues.
Yes, it does. We're just a couple of days out. Races are drawn this Saturday. We'll have some really exciting 2-year-old stakes on the program, as well as our first ever Classico Internacional de Caribe right here at Gulfstream Park.
Flags are up throughout the walking ring. You really get a sense we're on the verge, on the cusp of a big day. We should have a large crowd. We're anticipating a large crowd because, you know, as a big rock and roll guy, crowds and fans in Latin America and South America, they're just very, very passionate as a whole. So they love their thoroughbred racing. Racing, of course, an international game, and that was on display yesterday during our first ever post-position draw for the Caribbean Derby, the $300,000 stake. We've got the Justiciero, right? Did I say it correctly?
Yes, you got it.
He is owned by Mark Tacker, and our great Ron Nicoletti caught up with Mark to ask him about, well, how the horse is doing and what would it mean to win the Classico.
Tough year in Puerto Rico. How important is it for you to win a race like this after all that trouble down there to bring home a victory for Puerto Rico?
That will be incredible. I mean, unbelievable. I know a lot of people are going to fly from Puerto Rico to watch this race. A lot of Puerto Ricans that live in Florida are going to come Saturday. We're expecting a huge crowd here on Saturday, and this would be great for Puerto Rico. I mean, a lot of people are anxious to win this race. Hopefully we can do it. The horse is feeling great. I mean, there's no excuses. It's just we need to have good luck in the race, and I think the horse will do his job.
Pretty amazing now to have Mark Tacker with us, and there was a lot of interest in that draw. And it was great to see so many of the connections showing up and being quite honest, amped up about their prospects come Saturday. Now, as far as the $300,000 Caribbean Derby, the Caribbean Classic is concerned, dozen 3-year-olds entered that mile and a furlong race that will go as the 11th race on an 11-race card. And do note, come Saturday, an earlier than usual post of about 11:50.
Yes, and we hope to see you there. As Jason said, the energy should just be electric here at Gulfstream Park as well. We're really excited for that. Justiciero, the Puerto Rican Triple Crown winner, of course, second choice on the morning line.
All right, sounds good. And by the way, all stakes, 11 Saturday, all of them stakes. The first 6 on the program, very much about the 2-year-olds, as we have a number of launching pads to some traditional stakes throughout the championship meet for the soon-to-be 3-year-olds. And man, Todd Pletcher has really got a number of those races surrounded.
He is very well represented on Saturday. He has quite a few maidens in between today and tomorrow and leading up to the weekend as well, but certainly has a pretty big arsenal come Saturday.
Right, the 14-time defending Gulfstream Park championship meet champion trainer will have plenty to say throughout these multiple carryovers we have. I mean, Gulfstream Park on this opening Thursday, day number 4, is very much a case of carryover central. And we'll do a little housekeeping here and just show you what's on tap, beginning at about 12:35 with the first of 10, and a super high 5 carryover of about $2,700. The early pick 5 does not carry over, no matter whether anybody has 5 of 5. That pays out no matter what. That begins in race number 1. Things start to really, though, Acacia, get interesting beginning in the 5th as we start the pick 6.
They do. We had some pretty good prices yesterday in both the early part of the Rainbow 6 sequence and the last leg as well. So $41,000 plus in the Rainbow 6. And take note of this. In race number 6 today, we have a carryover in the late pick 5 as well. $64,000 plus. So that one, I think, is going to be very well bet. So don't miss out on those carryovers later later in the day as well.
And that carryover is pretty much due to the fact the catalyst was that near $185 winner. I think $1.82 to be precise. Yeah, 90 to 1 on the turf, winning yesterday's 6th race. Went to the lead, and that horse never looked back. This turf course in just 3 full cards has already produced 3 $100 plus winners, which I would venture to say that's probably a record at any major racetrack throughout the United States. And we'll see, of course, what the Thursday offering has in store as we are fast and firm and we get right into the action here. And that includes, naturally, Acacia's early pick 5 ticket as some turfers, 2 lifetime turf claimers, will bring in race number 1. And I struggle with this race. I'm curious to see who you use.
I struggled a bit too. I ended up just using, I used 3 horses in here, and kind of to piggyback on what Jason was just saying about some of these turf races in here, you want some coverage because it all kind of determines which horses send, which go to the lead. I think you have Sanad with some natural speed. I'm curious what we'll get from Grand Chief, if we will see him close like he did last time at Gulfstream Park West, and Could Be is still kind of lightly raced as well. So I'm using 3 in there, but those turf races in particular, you probably do want some coverage. 3 horses in race number 2 is the big question is, can Tale of Cantharos make it 3 in a row? This horse has just been fantastic since being claimed by Steve Clasaris. Race number 3, now what do we make of Dial 1? Speaking of trainer Todd Pletcher, he has this horse who's faced stakes competition now in for the $16,000 tag. I like Rogue Patriot personally. Race number 4, going to be using just 2 horses in there with competitive player, and She's Got the Look. And then the 5th race, I'm very intrigued by the Laurel Shipper, super striking for Mike Trombetta. Going to also be backing myself up with One Breath at a Time, who ran well first out for Stanley Gold.
I like that horse, and Stanley, and we'll certainly expand on that thought or this thought in a few moments. Stanley trains for the big picture in a career, not just for one race.
Absolutely.
And I expect her to really move forward off a taxing trip first time out. We do welcome, even just looking over the races in your early pick 5 and the plays that you made. Joel Rosario in town today, Javier Castellano as well. Joining the likes of John Velasquez and Luis Saez, who were here and rode yesterday. And Luis, of course, won 3 on the Wednesday card.
He did. He kind of picked up right where he left off as far as being the leading rider during the championship meet last year. And we have a lot of people, not only jockeys, but horsemen as well. I think I pulled 5 replays today, and they were from 5 different tracks for today's show.
Well, it's a good scene set for this entire week at Gulfstream with shippers galore. And that's the beauty of this championship meet. The best of the best from many different jurisdictions throughout the East Coast and the Midwest. As we begin again with the aforementioned 2 lifetime 16K claimers on the turf. The starting point, I feel, and maybe it's a shaky starting point or not an overwhelming favorite type starting point, your top pick, because he's lightly raced, to number 3, Could Be.
That was one of the things that I did like about this horse. You have some horses that have just had so many tries, and some that just kind of have that late running style, including King Mara, which was one of the reasons I did kind of take a pass on him, though I thought his last race was very good, and I'll be curious what else you have to say about him. But Could Be gets Tyler Gaffalione in the saddle. I thought last time actually his race was pretty solid, and he was just very wide on the first turn. That's kind of a theme that you saw on that turf course at Gulfstream Park West as well. Lots of horses losing ground early on. I thought he was one of the only ones making up significant ground in the last race, and in his debut he was much closer to the pace. So he's shown some versatility, and he only has 2 races.
Yeah, that is a major potential feather in his cap. He's lightly raced, and he's got Gaffalione. Others that are going to take some play, the 8 Grand Chief, who we both have in the mix, as that horse drops down and is coming out of, I think, just a deeper, tougher field in terms of quality at Gulfstream Park West. I'm going to give a shot, though, as you mentioned, to the 6 King Mara for a couple different reasons. First off, I think he's properly spotted first time against winners, and I do believe he's a little better than his maiden win would attest to. And I'm not going to hold the fact that both Captain Kit and another softball out of that maiden 25 returned here on opening weekend and didn't run all that great. I'm not going to hold that against King Mara, who at times has run and caught some respectable special weight fields. And the turf, to me, yes, speed has been the weapon of choice on the main, and especially on the main and on the turf too. But the turf seemed a little more even to me yesterday, and I won't let that deter me here with the horse who does his best making that one run.
Yeah, certainly could. And he's run some solid enough races, certainly,
Yes.
to be a good player in here. The number 5, Sanad, did intrigue me with Edgard Zayas. I just thought he could be one that's kind of in that first flight and kind of right up there in the catbird seat.
All right, as we continue on in the catbird seat, tucked up in that groove in the pocket as we get on to Thursday's second race, an all-turf double on day number 4 here of the championship meet. 3 lifetime, $16,000, 3 and up claimers here in race number 2. And talking about those shippers and a number of high-profile barns snowbirding here in South Florida, we're happy to have them. Christophe Comant certainly starts the conversation along with Gaffalione, who's got a legit chance to sweep the early double as he pilots the number 5 Abbott. This is a move, and we will bring you a stat that Christophe Comant, and not a claiming barn by any stretch of the imagination, and it's not a big sample, but the fact that Christophe, when he dips these horses down and cuts them in half, they have not run all that often, but the ones that have showed up in the entries have been close to unbeatable.
It's a great stat. It's not a big sample size, as you said, but it's just very niche and to show that he really does a great job with it. Now, last time out, he was kind of drawn outside, and though he was forwardly placed, he just was kind of between horses, and then he just faded very, very fast. And that was really what did end up turning me off on him. Certainly with the drop, he's a big player in here. I just went with the 6 Tale of Cantharos, who's just been so good since getting on the turf, adding the blinkers, and running for Steve Klasaris. And Sebastian Zayas rode him to victory last time. He'll get his brother Luis Zayas, who, as we know, had a great day yesterday, as we said, picking up where he left off, in the saddle again today.
We'll see how he does. I wasn't overly in love with the fact that they run him back for 16 because he's been good on the turf, winning both those races, but maybe a case of the championship meet here. These races come up very tough. They claim them first out for 16. They've already gotten their money back and then some. Yep. They win today and lose them for 16. It's a nice little tidy profit, and that's how you play the claiming game. Now, the 8 Stone Heart, speaking of the claiming game, the drop in class caught my eye, and I see that's something not lost on you. This is not a layup by any means, especially if you get a well-meant Abbott on the drop and you get the good Tale of Cantharos on the turf. But I do believe Stoneheart, those races, even the Florida-bred optional claimers, they're slightly tougher fields than what he catches here.
And I think especially the field he faced 2 starts back against Xander and Swagger, Shoshone Brave. Those are some very, very good horses and kind of specialists at that 5 furlongs on the turf distance.
Without a doubt. As we turn the page, we come up on our opening race today on the dirt. Thursday's third, a 2-year-old $16,000 claimer sprinting at 3/4 of a mile. We see a number of sizable Todd Pletcher trained drop downs over the next couple of days. Alcor's running tomorrow, I think in the 2nd or 3rd. He's probably going to be around 2 to 5, and you're definitely looking at an odds-on favorite here in the 7 Dial 1. You need to decide what the deal is, because this horse is dangled for 16 and is a complete, whether he wins or not, he is just a total give-up by this barn.
He really is, and that's what I don't like about it, because this is a horse that they clearly had some hope for at the start. He won his debut race on the turf. They tried him in the Kissa Native, and I thought he actually ran solidly. If you look back at that race, he was dueling with Slacks, of course, pretty much the whole early part of the race. Diamond Dupes and Bobby X, I think, are very nice horses, and around that time, really coming into themselves as 2-year-olds. They had entered him on the turf in the Laurel Futurity, ended up scratching there and ran him instead in the Armed Forces here at Gulfstream. Now, it was a race that did end up coming off of the turf. He ran poorly, but all of a sudden, they drop him in for the $16,000 tag. So after kind of not having much, maybe it's weather luck, racing luck, whatever it is, they take that significant drop with him. And we kind of saw this yesterday, I believe, Miss Sophia Star, with a horse that had actually run solidly in special weight, and then the second time out, they dropped her right for claiming, and she didn't run as well as they would have hoped. So that's my biggest concern with Dial 1. I just didn't know what to do with him.
So you're a fan of the 2 Rogue Patriot, as again, we welcome and say, welcome to Hallandale Beach, Mr. Javier Castellano. first ride at Gulfstream Park today since being minted and enshrined in Racing's Hall of Fame this past August, so that's really great. And Saffie Joseph, a big end to the Gulfstream Park West meet, and why don't we get everybody up to speed with the video to boot of Rogue Patriot.
Well, this is across town at Gulfstream Park West, and yes, it was a wet track that day, but I think that this horse has some solid enough dirt for him for sure. As we pick it up from the quarter pole, he's the number 5. He kind of let the top 2 run away, and I thought that this was actually a very smart ride by Marcos Meneses. And as the number 4, Zing Zing, starts to pull away, the very speedy one, you have, if we can just freeze it right here, as you have, of course, Zing Zing out front. And here's all of these horses back here. And as we let it roll down to the wire, you have To Joe, who's the number 1 horse, just come flying from last. But I thought it was a very big performance from the number 5, Rogue Patriot, on this day. And his only dirt race, Jason, he was beaten by Coal Miner's Son. He's a very good horse, I think.
Oh, I'm a fan of Coal Miner's Son. What, did he win 3 races consecutively, or close to 3 throughout the summertime? Rogue Patriot, a major player. My price idea, the 4, Mr. GT. I feel as though the turf, layoff turf, slop, you do get his best race today, but it really all hinges upon what we get from Dial 1 and how you feel. Dial 1 for a big favorite, that's for sure, in race number 3. Now, the 4th race on the card, another main track sprint as we go on to this Florida bred 3-and-up filly mare, a other than allowance optional claimer, and the one sort of defining and very obvious and constant trait throughout this race. Wow, everybody seemingly likes to run and gun and get involved early. This pace should be supersonic.
Yes,
right?
and that's exactly how I saw it. And I think you and I probably had the same idea in going with competitive player, because I don't think she's a need the lead type. I think that she's got the versatility. She has a very smart jock in the saddle, and Javier Castellano picking up the mount. And I think both apprentices rode this mare well in her last couple of starts, but certainly you get a much more experienced rider in the saddle this afternoon. And she's a solid mare, I think.
As she picks up Javier for Peter Walder and competitive player, the one thing as we have her on top, and again, we think she might even be a little better, or certainly equally as comfortable when she's able to track and stalk and pass horses. She is just 1 for her last 19. We still have a lot more ground to cover on the show, but we do have to mention who I've got second, and you, I'm assuming because of the layoff, and it is one of the longer layoffs, save perhaps the likes of a De Haas that you'll ever see, the number 6, Dancy, who, I mean, if you were wondering, she has not run in 873 days. The good news is, and she hasn't run since her 2-year-old season. Keep in mind, American Pharoah was basically training towards the Haskell when this filly by the Wildcat won her debut in July of 15 here at GP. They don't bring her back for a tag. Who knows if they tried to breed her. I'll be curious to hear what you have to say about her visually here in the walking ring.
I'll be curious to see her as well. I think Toast of New York may have her beat as far as layoffs, though, and so it is possible, certainly. We don't really know what to get with her. It was a fast track in 2015 as a 2-year-old, so we'll see what we get. Layoffs are not really the most productive move for this barn, but we'll certainly be excited to see what we see from Dancy.
And we're excited about Rainbow 6 carryover and a rare late pick 5 carryover. We attack them after the break.
Pennsylvania, proud of our growing breeding and racing industry. Tens of thousands of jobs with a massive economic impact, leading the way in testing and aftercare. Only 3 states have bred more Breeders' Cup champions. Plus, we have North America's most lucrative awards program, up to 40% in breeder awards and owner bonuses, 400+ restricted races annually, and our program has paid out $30 million for the 5th straight year. Breeding and racing in Pennsylvania, it's a winner.
I'm Javier Castellano.
I am Joel Rosario.
I'm John Velasquez. For the first time ever, the Clásico del Caribe will be at Gulfstream Park. Entertainment, special events, and the best horses from Latin America and the Caribbean. Right here in South Florida.
Right here in South Florida. It's a thrilling, it's a popular, it's an international, the Clásico del Caribe. It's coming to Gulfstream Park.
The Clásico del Caribe is coming to Gulfstream Park on December 9th.
I'll be there. Will you?
And And if you were wondering, Johnny V will be here as well on Caribbean Classic Day this coming Saturday, the first ever held outside of South America and Latin America, as Jason and Keisha give you a hearty carryover central. Welcome back to Gulfstream today and Rainbow Six time. So what are we doing?
All right, we'll show you my ticket this afternoon. I did find a single trying to keep things affordable. We have more than $41,000 in that pool so far. We started off with a fun way to always kick off a sequence with a 2-year-old maiden special weight. I'm going to be using 3 horses in there, 3 deep in that maiden 50 on the turf. Really nice race. Shanghai Jewel, another Todd Pletcher drop down, should be a big favorite in that race. Going to be going 3 deep in the 7th race. We did have, I think, a pretty key scratch of 3-Star Stone, who I believe will run tomorrow instead. And in race number 8, just using the 3 LA House and the 4 Nikki's Cause. My single comes with 8 Town for Brian Lynch, who's just been very good in the 9th race. And I understand it's a tough spot to single. I just think that this horse just looks so good in this spot and has been so good recently. And 3 deep in the nightcap, hopefully we get there. Not an easy way to cash things out.
No, it's not. And there, you know, what really I think complicates the 10th race, the cash out, and obviously the 5 and the Rainbow Six, it looks like the major contenders are all posted towards the outside, and they're not the only ones that bring big early speed to that race. So you combine that, a wide post going 5 on the turf, and when you're likely going to be battling a part of a fast pace, they're going to have to be pretty good. But we'll talk about that in a few moments. Let's get through the first leg of this Rainbow Six, and we bring on the 2-year-old filly Florida bred maiden special weight runners on the dirt. Number of solid, maybe unspectacular, but solid building block efforts with a number of these horses, first or second time out, and that's really what my exacta is about with the 4-1 Breath at a Time and the 5 Perspective Diva. Thought they both just ran in their most recent. They ran like fillies who were going to give you their best efforts today.
Yes, and that's certainly key. I think 1 Breath at a Time really showed a lot of promise in her debut race too, and you brought up a great point earlier that Stanley Gold is a big picture kind of trainer and certainly an excellent horseman. She has some speed as well, and she's nicely bred, and it looks like the offspring of brethren have generally improved with more distance and more experience. So she'll try the 6 again today, but she has the race under her belt. I did land on the 8 Super Striking. I mentioned this shipper earlier, and we'll take a little trip to our sister track in Maryland at Laurel Park. She was the 1A that day. You can see her a little bit wide as we pick it up at the quarter pole. She was moving to kind of stay off of the rail. I think a wet track probably the key to that. So she is very wide coming around the turn and in the stretch as well. But I thought dueling gamely with a horse in Frechette that ended up just pulling away. Looking at her running style, Jason, I don't think she really cared for the wet track, yet she still stayed on very gamely, and I thought ran a hard-fought second.
She's got a big chance, and this will be the first of a couple of key players trained by Mike Trombetta, shipping south for the winter, formerly based up in Maryland at Laurel, who are going to see action over the next couple of days. I've got no argument with her being a major player. We'll see. There's some firsters in the race from barns that really aren't household names. We'll see if any one of them takes some early money. But again, you and I prefer horses with experience in race number 5. Now we move on to race number 6. Late pick 5 carryover of about 64,000. Felt bad, and it's a part of the game, and you got to take the body blows, but man, what a tough way to lose a Rainbow Six and the late pick 5 yesterday in that tight photo behind that 30-1 winner in the last race. But we'll see what the sequence has in store, and I kick things off with that aforementioned Pletcher drop down in the 6 Shanghai Jewel, who normally, even though Miss Sophia's Star lost yesterday, this is an area where the Pletcher barn usually wins, albeit at short prices, but they win nonetheless. The 7th race, I'm down to only 2 in there with the scratch at 3-Star Stone, who I like quite a bit. Spread in the 8th. I'm wondering if we have another $100 turf winner, because that's a race that strikes me as maybe a goofy, wacky result in there. 9th race is an excellent, excellent Thursday feature, and I'm with you wholeheartedly. 8-Town looks like a promising late blooming son of Speightstown for Brian Lynch, and he may work out a great trip either on the lead or just off of it. And I got my eye, that is, and an idea with the price on Twist Cat Candy in the last, who I obviously use the two favorites who, once again, too exagerous and all go. They have speed, and they're both saddled with outside posts in a bulky field and in a pace that's going to be on the fast side. I thought the 3 Twist Cat Candy would show up with a good effort in his first start in about 70 days. So there you go. Now, race number 6, moving on to Shanghai Jewel and talking about the barn and the Pletcher operation as they kind of give up on this filly by Shanghai Bobby. Do keep in mind, Todd's got 1,000 horses, though, and he is not one to waste his time. He puts them where he thinks they fit, where he thinks they can win. And I also think part of the conversation is the turf season's done in New York. I think they're on it today, but you would imagine within the next few days, that'll be all they wrote for turf racing until next spring. So Shanghai Jewel with the stat as she drops in for the 50K, getting the blinkers on with jockey Luis Saez. Just a move the barn does quite often and does so well at 6 for 9 here. Just being very specific and exclusive to Gulfstream.
And I think it's good to look at Gulfstream because you're right. The barn does have a very high number of runners. And as we go directly, if we can, into this replay from Belmont on October 28th, she did show quite a bit of speed. There she is, the number 3. She actually dueled with Daniele, the number 2. Pretty much the entire race. And I thought that she held on better than Daniele did, or maybe some of the other pace horses, as other horses were closing outside of her. If we can just freeze right there. Again, here is Shanghai Jewel, the number 8, and to her outside, she has horses just coming to the attack as we let it go down to the wire. She's nicely bred. She doesn't have any siblings that won on the turf, and the dam didn't win on the turf, but Todd Pletcher put her on the grass, and that really seems to be where she likes to go.
I think she's going to be pretty tough at a very short price. Bristol's Brook, I didn't want to give up on her yet. I know she was claimed off Bill Mott, first out by Mike Maker, and thought she looked like an intriguing sort of new face fuzzy last time. I won't hold only one turf race for Mike over at GPW fairly late in the meet, November 12th against her. She was my price idea. I'm glad you got her in the mix.
And it's worth noting she was very keyed up and very nervous before that race last time. So now a turf race under her belt, and at Gulfstream she should show some improvement. All
right, let's move on to race number 7 as we move further down the line in these carryover multi-race wagers. 7th race is a 6.5 furlong, 3 and up, 2 lifetime claimer. Our first scratches on the card today, which is a beautiful thing. You want big fields, competitive racing, Gulfstream the place. You've got to get up through the first 7 races to come across the number 3 3-Star Stone and the number 8 horse R. Sarge, who are the only scratches through now. Now, the 7 Brave Enrique doesn't have much speed, but is taking a well-meant drop, and this is just a much easier race with no 3-Star Stone.
It certainly is, and he's really, I think, the key to the race on the drop in here. It's been a long time since he won. His last victory was August of 2016 at Gulfstream when he broke his maiden. But he has, I think, just been running against some very solid fields in here. I did land and default into the number 1 Illustrious Sun, who also gets a drop in class. I just think he's a bit more tactical and has Edgar Zayas in the saddle. Second time out for Dave Fox.
All right, we'll see how he does. He's got some races in the past that would make him mighty tough.
Yes.
We'll see how he does, dropping in for 12.5. Really a case about the drop downs, getting some class relief in race number 7 as we are down to the opening leg of the final pick 3, and we're on the turf for race number 8. 2-year-old fillies in this $25,000 starter optional claimer at 7.5 furlongs. There's a couple of key Keeneland, last out Keeneland horses and shippers fairly late in the card. We already mentioned 8-Town in the 9th a couple of times. Nikki's Cause is the first one, and although I would consider covering your bases with her in the multi-race bets, I didn't think she did any running last time out in a race at Keeneland. A better field, but a race that featured a very fast pace that melted down. I have my eye on the 8 Guidonia, and I think your top pick, LA House, is going to run gigantic for Antonio.
I love LA House going 2 turns once again, and we'll go back to her last time going 2 turns on the turf. That was on the 21st of September. It was her win. There she is, the number 2, and we'll pick it up at the quarter pole. She kind of hugged the rail, I thought, and you can see there was a loose horse in there, but she avoided any trouble. She was forwardly placed. She took over the lead and kind of repelled the bid of the number 1, Telling Me Softly. Just think that going 5/8 last time was not what she wanted to do.
But a nice prep under her belt when she was just outrun and outfooted by Rose's Roses and South who love the turf at GPW, and she should be sitting on, I think, her best effort today from a good post. The 8 Guidonia, not a dirt horse, back on the turf, and I like her as well going this 7.5 furlong distance. But this is a race. I went 4 deep in that late pick 5. This is a race I think you want to cover your bases. Again, I thought there was a good chance we might see some chaos and some big balloons on the tote board. Race number 9 goes as our Thursday feature on this opening Thursday program of the championship meet. Final dirt race is a solid one. It's a 3 and up, 2 other than allowance optional claimer. And boy, I am just so anxious to see what we get out of the likely favorite, the number 2, 8-Town, who, talking about his last race at Keeneland and even the race prior to that at Belmont, he has run fast and he has won easy in his last couple.
Yes, he has. And this is his last race at Keeneland. This is on October 25th. His non-winners of 2 allowance race. We're going to start with the head-on of the break, and as we pick it up, he is the number 4. You can see in the short comment he was in tight at the start, so great job upstairs. Thank you very much for kind of the slow-mo starts. You can see that he was just kind of squeezed on either side. Now as we go to the quarter pole, again, if we'll just freeze right there, there he is in the red and yellow colors. As we let it go from there, he's the number 4. He's a little bit wide, and I thought it was just a nice performance from him. He's really, as you said, a late bloomer. His last 2 races have been very good.
And they've come up fast on Beyer, and it just seems like Brian Lynch has taken his time, and probably taken his time for good reason. Brian, I'd say a more traditional type, conservative type horseman, and that is definitely a compliment. He waits till things, it's all systems go, and the proof has been in the pudding so far with 8-Town. Now, the major question outside of how does 8-Town do in his Florida debut today is what do we get from the 8 Vencedor? And he was, and I was probably remiss when I gave Canta Clara Tony Ann's Miracle sort of horse of the meets at GPW. He was very much and is a part of the conversation after running a handful of times and averaging a race about every 8.5 days. Was he just a Gulfstream Park West freak, or has he really improved here as Antonio Sano wheels him back about a week and a half after his last?
Today's the day that I'll have to prove that, as he is 0 for 12 at Gulfstream Park. He had those nice victories and a good second behind Fire Mission last time out at Gulfstream Park West, but he's got to prove himself today, as he is the type of horse that has been very good at picking up checks, but a little bit lighter in the win column. Abounding Legacy has faced some really nice horses too. He was second behind Splash Rules and the Alabama Jacks last time out, so be curious what we get from him.
All right, let's move on and we'll wrap up the card. Race number 10, carryovers come to a close. You've got to be in it to win it, folks, and best of luck as we finish things off with the 2 lifetime 3 and up claimer at 5/8 on the turf. Noted it a couple of times, and you've got some tough outside posts with 2 Exaggerous and All Go. And do note the 13-horse Smart Dude drew into the field. That horse may add even more fuel to a pace that should be very honest at the least, and perhaps has the potential to be on the very fast side. And I didn't think Twist Cat Candy in a couple of his turf races throughout June and July here at GP ran all that poorly. In fact, I like the fact that David Kazan laid him up over at GPW, and I think he's going to get a good trip at a fast pace, dangerous at a price. And I see you took a small shot at least on top against the 2 big favorites.
I did as well, and Twist Cat Candy is pretty consistent. I thought Wildcat Saint was a consistent horse as well. I thought he faced a good field last time. I know that he was just behind 2 Exaggerous, but I think that he's the type of horse that can kind of sit in that catbird seat as well.
All right, as we bring on Ron Nicoletti, he'll be joining us. It's good to have you with us, everybody. Opening Thursday, Pete Aiello coming up next, and there's very few, but pens and pencils ready. Scratches and changes are coming your way.